Jimmy Kimmel ignores Eric Swalwell rape allegations and resignation months after launching his gubernatorial campaign on show. Like, can anybody really defend that? Can anybody really pretend that's normal and fine and good? I certainly can't, and I would never. I feel like if you even try to engage in that level of mental gymnastics, you might pull something. Up first, we're going to talk about the comedian. I kind of have to say that in air quotes because I can't remember any time recently that he was particularly funny. If you go back in the day, he certainly was and did some fun things. I think was Jimmy Kimmel the one that did like the pranks on kids, like unwrapping presents on Christmas. I remember finding that funny many years ago. But he's essentially morphed into one of these like late night talk shows where they just do political chit chat and then they call it comedy, and they're really just like pursuing clapter, which is where no one laughs, but they clap along at what you're saying. They're like, so true, King. Oh, so stunning. So brave. That's what his show has turned into, Jimmy Kimmel. So all I ever see from him is softball interviews with Democratic and liberal figures, basically. And one of those figures that he promoted was California Congressman Eric Swalwell, who actually launched his campaign for governor in California on Jimmy Kimmel's show. And Jimmy gave him a very friendly, receptive audience. And now that Swalwell has dropped out of the race and is resigning from Congress after some very serious sexual assault allegations that were corroborated with additional evidence as well, not just a he said, she said, thankfully Jimmy Kimmel informed his audience and told them about the controversy and said that he is glad that Swalwell's being held accountable. Just kidding. He didn't do any of that. That would require, like, I don't know, some integrity. Here's the headline from Mediaite. Jimmy Kimmel ignores Eric Swalwell rape allegations and resignation months after launching his gubernatorial campaign on show. Then there's a nice image there of Mr. Swalwell and Mr. Kimmel together on set. Here's the text of the article. Late night host Jimmy Kimmel ignored the rape allegations against Representative Eric Swalwell, as well as the former congressman's subsequent resignation on his show Jimmy Kimmel Live this week, just months after Swalwell launched his gubernatorial campaign on Kimmel's show. Kimmel made no mention of the scandal or of Swalwell in general during his show on Monday, and, despite an article from Breitbart News criticizing his decision to ignore the matter, proceeded to ignore the scandal again on Tuesday. So let's unpack that for a second. You could almost forgive, well, not really, but you could try to see a way in which there's a valid reason that he didn't cover it Monday night. Like, I mean, there really isn't an excuse for it because it's a live show. It's not like it was pre-taped and they have a whole team and they adapt to the news cycle and they talk about what's happening that day. But you could almost give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, well, maybe he wanted to wait and see exactly how it was going to play out a little bit. Maybe he was waiting for more facts or more information, and he was going to talk about it on Tuesday, and then Tuesday came and went. And what makes it crazier, too, is that, as this article points out, people were criticizing him and calling him out, Jimmy Kimmel, for not talking about it on Monday. So he definitely was aware of that, or at least some of his team would have been aware of that criticism. They're going to be monitoring his name in the headlines and other things. And so they internalized that and still did not talk about it. Now, maybe they will as time goes on eventually, but it's just astonishing because it just kind of shows you like the ingrained partisan bias of these things. They would not be doing the same for a Republican. I think we all know that, right? That if a Republican congressman had one that they had made fun of in the past or covered in the past, let alone done a friendly pal around interview with, but they don't really do that with Republicans. Jimmy Kimmel would have been all over it. And then you wonder why these late night shows like have totally tanked and are much, much less culturally relevant and popular than they used to be. Well, because they've morphed into just like partisan slop, and they're not particularly funny, and then they're not even particularly good partisan content. Like if I wanted partisan news analysis, I think you'll be much better suited watching MSNBC or MS Now than Jimmy Kimmel. just to get a perspective of what those people are saying. So it's like, I really don't understand the point of this endeavor at all. But there's more here that we'll get into. Let's get back to this article here. Instead of talking about Swalwell, Kimmel's monologues focused almost solely on President Donald Trump, including the president's feud with the Vatican, his DoorDash stun, his failed lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal, and the controversy over Trump's decision to post an image of himself as Jesus Christ. So, okay. Obviously, those things are big and newsworthy, but you still could discuss the Eric Swalwell story. Give me a break. And not all of those things are like must includes. Like, obviously, you got to talk about the Vatican. You got to talk about the Trump image of himself as Jesus Christ, or Trump tells us it's him as a doctor, because that also makes sense. And because doctors always have glowing hands healing the sick and long flowing robes and demons in the background in the sky. Yeah. That's a whole insane saga. I talked about that on my panel debate channel, Brad versus the World, that you should go subscribe if you haven't yet. But anyway, if you had time to like talk about the DoorDash thing, like this DoorDash old lady who visited the White House, and there were a couple awkward moments, I think you could have squeezed in the resignation and massive political scandal that's like roiling Washington, D.C. Maybe just a little bit of priorities there. It's not like, oh, well, we just didn't have time to talk about it. We all know that's. Anyway, more from the article here. It was on Kimmel's show where Swalwell announced his California gubernatorial campaign just a few months ago. Quote, "I came here tonight, Jimmy, to tell you and your audience that I'm running to be the next governor of California," announced Swalwell on Jimmy Kimmel Live in November as the audience cheered. After making a joke about Swalwell's beard, Kimmel concluded, "Thank you for being here and announcing this exciting news here on the show. And thanks for your support throughout our ordeal. Eric Swalwell, everybody, your congressman from California and perhaps our future governor of California." So that's what makes this so diabolical that he didn't talk about this, is that he literally announced his campaign for governor. It would be insane if Jimmy Kimmel hadn't talked about it, like, regardless. But the fact that he specifically went on this show and still didn't talk about it, it's just so indefensible. Like, can anybody really defend that? Can anybody really pretend that's normal and fine and good? I certainly can't, and I would never. I feel like if you even try to engage in that level of mental gymnastics, you might pull something. Okay? Like, that can't be safe. I don't know. Why do these people do it? Like, it's not that hard. This is the same thought I had in a conversation where I was talking to somebody who still would not admit that Trump lost the 2020 election. It's like, you can say, yes, he did lose. And, I didn't think all the ways it was conducted were fair, but he lost and he won the other 2 times. And, like, it's really not. Why can't you just acknowledge things sometimes that are objectively happening and real and true, even if they don't perfectly align with looking perfect for your party? It would make you more honest, and people would appreciate your perspective more if you actually did that. Flip side here, I want just a related story to this that I want to briefly mention is, like, so much of media, whether it's these late night shows or literal cable news, is just turning into partisan propaganda, and it's so biased. But sometimes you don't even notice the bias, because bias in media is not just about how you spin a story, right? Because obviously when you cover a certain story, you put a spin on it, you have an angle. It's also about what you choose to cover and what you don't. So remember the whole controversy from this past weekend where Trump posted an image depicting himself as Jesus, which is blasphemous and which is offensive to Christians. Well, he did that on Sunday night. And then Fox and Friends, right, one of the flagship shows of Fox News, they have a 3-hour broadcast every weekday morning. And according to Mediaite's analysis, on Monday, they did not mention it in their 3-hour broadcast. They did not mention once Trump's post that everyone was talking about, that was hugely controversial. They just totally ignored it. And, like, that is so insane. That is just you think if President Biden had posted an image of himself depicting himself as Jesus, they wouldn't have talked about it? They probably would have dedicated the whole first hour to blowing a casket over it. Some of their hosts might have stroked out on air. They would have been so outraged. Spit would have been flying from their mouth. And they literally didn't find 2 minutes to do a segment on it. That's crazy, actually. And really, really embarrassing as a media company. Anyway, especially because some of the hosts have, like, branded themselves and their commentary around their faith and regularly weave in religion and faith into their coverage, and they still didn't cover it. I don't know, man. That to me is just so diabolical. And I actually did know that Fox News would become very biased in favor of the Trump administration, because it's the same way like CNN, MSNBC were so carrying water for Biden. I actually think, if anything, Fox, though, it's gone further than I expected into being like just party line Trump TV, with some exceptions. They platform some critics like Jessica Tarlov, and they have some sharp-elbowed anchors who ask tough questions and push back. But a lot of its programming is just so obsequious and so incredibly biased, to the point where, I mean, it's hard to even call that anything other than propaganda. And it's just interesting because for years, Republicans and conservatives railed against mainstream media bias and establishment media being biased biased in favor of liberals and Democrats. And I agreed with a lot of those criticisms. And maybe this makes me naive or silly, but I think I kind of believed too many people credulously when they said that they wanted actual independent journalism, or they wanted like a real media, and they actually just wanted biased partisan slop in their direction. That was never what I wanted. So I'm going to keep calling it out when it comes from conservative media during the Trump administration.